Today we're talking about disco, baby. Filtered disco house music. And this is what we're making. Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about how you can get a filtered disco house sound in your music. Specifically how to process the sample. Once you've found a cool sample, how do you get it to have that vibe and that kind of characteristic that we're looking for? I fell in love with this style through the classic labels like Relay and Creedmoor, but there's a modern contemporary kind of take on this style that's coming through and it's a bit more underground and a bit more relevant. I'm talking about some of the tracks from artists like Jansons, Holland, Brokenears, and stuff on labels like Downtown Underground and Too Many Rules. I'd also categorize my track Maruba on 8-bit and the track you can currently hear, which is called Sensei, coming out on Oral. So now you know what we're talking about, let's get into Ableton and make some. Alright, so here we are inside Ableton. Let's have a quick listen to what we're making today. As always, the Ableton project for this file is available to download from my Patreon. There's a link in the description, so go grab that if you want to have another look at the file. Okay, so that's what we're going to end up with, but how do we get there? Alright, so I've got this drum loop. Nice, funky, housey vibe. Strong foundation for the track. The project tempo is at 125 BPM. Now on this audio track here, I've got 4 disco samples, and we're just going to play through those and audition them. See if there's something we like with the track. First of all, I'm just going to turn on this LFO tool to get the kick on the samples out of the way of the kick in our track. Okay, so I really like the groove on sample 4. Now I'm going to turn on a filter and listen to the tones as I sweep through the sample with the filter and see which one's responding well to that cutoff. I'll just pump up the LFO amount here so that it's automating the cutoff sweep so I don't have to do it manually while I play. Alright, so I'm liking the vibe of sample 3 and sample 4. Now in a lot of the classic filtered house tracks that we all know and love, the samples are shifted up or down in pitch. And this is actually as a byproduct of using these analog samplers like an MPC or an SP1200. When they speed up or slow down the sample to match the tempo of their track, it actually changes the pitch of the sample. Doing this can give like a really cool vibe and make it sound quite authentic. So let's have a quick listen to what happens and how these respond to change in pitch. So on sample 3 I felt like pitching it up to 2 semitones gave a bit more energy and a bit more vibe. But I'm still liking sample 4 the best, so let's use that and move on. For this one we won't pitch it. So we've chosen our sample, add the sidechain. Now the next step is to compress the absolute hell out of it. We're going to really slam the compressor, and the point here is to really smash the dynamics and bring out the harmonics in the mid-range. In the end, we're going to cut off the low end and cut off the high end, so we want those mids to really stand out. We're going for like a wall of sound effect here. And with our beat, so we're not really adding much volume, but it starts to sound a lot louder and thicker. Okay, so let's get to filtering. I've got an auto filter here. I'm going to add a healthy amount of resonance, and I'm going to turn it onto this MS20 setting with about 3.5 dB of drive. Then we're going to sweep through between like 1 and 500 and see if we can find a sweet spot. So everything in that range seems to respond quite well to the filtering. The next step is to layer up the bass line. So I've got a bass patch here that I prepared. It's got a sub oscillator with a bit of tone, a saw wave, and then a pretty heavy filter. Now we need to figure out the notes of the original sample. When I listen to it, I can hear it's playing 8th notes, a lower octave on the kick and then a higher octave on the offbeat. That's more apparent if you take off the LFO tool. So what I'll do is use this spectrum set to the notes preset, and we can see which tones are actually being played. Okay, so looking at this, I can tell that it's playing C sharp, B, and G, which tells me that this is in the key of B minor. So it plays across 3 bars on the C sharp, and then on the final 4th bar, it goes half bar of B and then half a bar of G. So let's just program in that MIDI. Let's take a listen. LFO tool to get out of the way of our beat. Sounds good. So next I'm going to add a high cut to the bass, just to filter out a bit of the upper harmonics. And on the sample, I'm going to turn on this EQ and filter out some of the subs. So all of that together. Now the next step is to add some distortion. What I would normally use for this style is the D16 Decimort set to the MPC 60. This just gives like a really nice gritty flavor that I like. But for this, let's try out some of the Ableton saturation and distortion plugins. We've got Overdrive, probably a bit much. We've got a Bit Crusher Redux with a bit reduction setting of 6. Sounds cool, but maybe a little bit too subtle. Now I've got the Spectrum set to the Hot Tubes preset. So that's sounding really nice and juicy to me. It adds a bit of extra grit and character. Now for an extra wee sprinkling of spice, I'm going to add on this flanger effect. Just kind of adds some extra overtones and gives it a little bit of interest in the panorama. For this, you could use a chorus, a phaser, a tremolo, whatever you want really, just something to add interest. Keep it subtle though. Now when it comes to developing this into a full track, what I would do is lay out my drum and bass groove and then bring the sample across the whole length of the track and automate it. To do that, you just hit the record arm button on the sample, select the auto filter, hit record, and record yourself automating the filter by hand. Doing this by hand helps to give an extra kind of authentic and humanized feel to the track. So to fill out the rest of the elements of the track, what I've done here is found a vocal sample, added some effects. We've got a crash fill, and this riser effect. That one's from my sample pack, link up here. Now I've added some extra melodic elements, 3 stabs doing like a question and answer type thing. And a high string for that housey disco vibe. So all together. If you want to take a look through all these extra bits, there's a link in the description to download the project. That way you can get in there and see how I've done them. But the main point of the tutorial is to show you about filtering the sample and how I process that sample, as that's the element that's giving the main vibe and the personality to the track. There you go guys, hope you enjoyed that and hope you learned something. This kind of music is really fun to make as you can kind of catch a vibe and get things going really quickly. It gives you the opportunity to do some crate digging and kind of interpret something with your own twist. Let me know in the comments, what's a recent sample you've heard flipped and who did it? If you enjoyed this video, then check out this one here. It's a walkthrough of one of my tracks in this style on Downtown Underground. Alright guys, well that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace!